Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we've got an absolutely fascinating breakdown lined up for you. We're looking at a brilliant new text that completely reimagines Adam Smith's foundational economic classic, The Wealth of Nations, but updates it for our impending era of artificial general intelligence, AGI. Think about it. We're literally moving from the age of steam and human muscle directly into an age where machines can think, learn, and act entirely on their own. So, if you want to understand the economic tectonic plates that are shifting right beneath our feet, you are definitely in the right place.
Okay, let's dive into this. The entire source material revolves around one single, incredibly urgent dilemma. What exactly happens to wealth when human labor is simply no longer needed? For centuries, our entire economic reality has been based on us trading our time, physical effort, and cognitive skills for a wage. But AGI fundamentally breaks that equation. We aren't just talking about a shiny new tool that makes humans faster, we're talking about a totally new species of worker. Now, to understand where we're going, we really have to look at where we came from. The text grounds the old economy rules in Adam Smith's famous 18th century pin factory. By dividing human labor into 18 distinct operations, 10 men could produce 48,000 pins a day. It was a massive leap. This division of labor increased dexterity, saved time, and drove the wealth of nations. But it was always limited by our human physical constraints and the local market, right? I mean, a human worker gets tired, needs a coffee break, requires sleep, and can only physically be in one geographic area at a time. Now contrast that with our rapidly approaching reality. An AGI agent, once it's trained, can be replicated at a near-zero marginal cost and deployed globally in an instant. It computes tirelessly, it never demands a vacation, and it never asks for a raise. It's an absolute, fundamental rupture in the history of production, because suddenly the market for intelligence is virtually unlimited. The source breaks this new machine workforce down into three specific forms of labor. First up is algorithmic. This is routine data processing, which, let's be honest, has already displaced a lot of clerical jobs. Second, we have cognitive labor. This is where machines reason and solve problems, kind of like a scientist or an engineer. The text notes that models like GPT-4 require a massive 10 to the 11th to 10 to the 13th flops, which is just an insane measure of raw computing power, just for reasoning tasks. And third, there's agentic labor. This is the machine acting autonomously out in the wild. The source highlights that 2025 became known as the Year of Agents, pointing to systems like OpenAI's Operator and Codex. These things can navigate the web and engineer software completely on their own, entering into actual economic transactions.
But there's a fascinating physical bottleneck here, known as Moravec's Paradox. While cognitive AI is advancing at this exponential rate, physical robotics actually lags behind. Real-time sensory motor tasks, say a robot just trying to walk across a cluttered room or assemble some complex physical goods, require an astonishing 10 to the 13th to 10 to the 15th flops per second just to simulate the physics and visual processing. This Moravec gap means that cognitive white-collar labor is actually being automated way faster than physical blue-collar labor. So this brings us to a terrifying mathematical reality that the source calls the Great AGI Paradox. We are creating the ultimate engine for productivity, yet we're eliminating the very input, human labor, that has driven our economic models for centuries. Think about that for a second. The entire history of capitalism relies on labor as a multiplying factor of production, but we're crossing a threshold where human labor is being entirely substituted. It's an economic paradigm shift replacing the worker not with a better tool, but with a completely synthetic equivalent. And this brilliantly illustrates the staggering productivity gains driving this shift. Look, traditional projected annual labor productivity growth hovers right around 1%, but the AGI-driven numbers tell a wildly different story. Firms holding AI patents are seeing a 6.8% revenue increase per employee, and AI call centers are seeing a 15% jump in resolution rates. We're looking at a self-reinforcing loop of automation, where machines are literally inventing better ways to facilitate labor faster than any human possibly could. Which means the crucial takeaway zeroes in on one specific number, $0. The source references economic models showing that output requires what's known as bottleneck work. These are the critical, limiting tasks that gatekeep economic growth. For all of modern history, humans provided that bottleneck work. But as AGI becomes capable of doing all of these essential tasks, human marginal productivity completely plummets. When we're no longer adding unique, irreplaceable value to the production chain, the share of labor income in GDP mathematically converges to zero, meaning human wages will tend exactly towards zero. It is a visceral, deeply sobering realization. Which naturally leads us to the ultimate structural contradiction of capitalist AI, presented quite impartially in the text. If no one has wages, well, who buys the products? You end up in this vicious cycle. You have an economy producing infinite abundance, but a wageless public that is entirely unable to consume it. The machine produces more than ever before, but the very workers who once bought those goods simply can't afford them anymore. We are, according to the source, facing a monumental ultimatum. The classical social contracts, which was entirely rooted in human labor as the foundation for participating in the economy, must be urgently renegotiated. The old rules simply do not apply when intelligence itself becomes the most exclusive form of capital. The obsolescence of human labor forces us to look at completely new societal frameworks. We can't just patch up the old system, we have to rethink it from the ground up. And the text outlines two distinct paths forward for humanity at this crossroads. Let's look at the first path described, technofeudalism. This is a scenario where AGI capital owners basically become a new global aristocracy. Because labor no longer earns wages, all economic power and income become hyper-concentrated in the hands of those who own the computational infrastructure and the data. In this model, the traditional middle class essentially dissolves into a state of dependence. It heavily echoes historical feudal relations between lords and serfs, except this time it's driven by algorithms instead of land ownership. Now, the text contrasts this with a second proposed path, categorized as AI knowledge socialism, or a new commonwealth. This system seeks to equitably distribute AGI prosperity through some new structural mechanisms. The source details proposals like a universal AI dividend, collective ownership of the digital commons, and progressive taxation of both AGI capital and the rent extracted from our data. The core goal here is to ensure that the massive abundance generated by AGI is shared by society at large, rather than hoarded by a select few. This moment carries immense philosophical weight. I want to read a direct quote from the conclusion of the source material that sums this up perfectly. If we choose wisely, the age of intelligence may be the age of abundance for all. If we choose foolishly, it may be the age of slavery for most. The stakes of our time literally could not be higher. We aren't just talking about upgrading our software, we are talking about upgrading our entire societal framework.
So, the choice is ours. Which path will we take? Will we allow the obsolescence of human labor to create unprecedented inequality? Or will we harness this infinite market for intelligence to unlock an age of universal abundance? I'll leave you with that provocative question to reflect on. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this really helped you structure your thinking around our rapidly approaching AGI economy. Keep learning and take care.